Hey everyone. In this video, I want to talk about the new next generation of Azure Data Box offerings. And this video is going to replace the video I did nearly 5 years ago. And this time, I'm actually going to show you a device and more of the experience actually using it. Now, when we think of Azure Data Box, this is an offline data movement. You're going to get one or more of these units shipped to your data center. I'm going to fill it with data. I ship it back, and that data is then ingested into your storage accounts or maybe into resource groups to make up managed disks. And while I'm going to focus on the option of importing data into Azure, the same process can be used to export from Azure to your data center. Now, before I touch on the data box, remember, ideally, use the network. Copy it over the wire, either encrypted over the internet. Maybe I have express route private peering. That's generally going to be the preferred approach, but it's not always possible. So the decisions and the requirements that may drive me to use offline data migration is going to depend on a number of factors. And we typically need to do this if, hey, I'm migrating an application from on-premises to Azure and it has a lot of data. It could be I'm moving a data lake or databases. It might be I'm just generating huge amounts of data that I want to process in the cloud. So I need to move data from one place to another, and I need to look at the criteria where copying over the network or online may not be possible. So the first thing you have to consider is, what is my bandwidth? So within my data center, where the data is, or maybe it's not in my data center, maybe that's part of the problem. So within my data center to the internet egress point, and then what is my connection to Azure, either over the internet or via express route? And remember, I still have regular production workloads going on. So in some ways, it's what is the spare amount of bandwidth I have available between where the data is and Azure. And then I have to think about, what is the rate of change? If the data is constantly being rewritten and totally replaced every few days, well, then copying it offline is probably not going to be that useful. In a best case scenario, you're probably looking at least a week from the time the data box arrives at your location, and then you ship it back, then it has to get ingested into your storage accounts. So if the data is changing so rapidly that within a few days or a week it's completely been replaced, then shipping it offline is not going to be super useful. Then I'm going to think about, well, what is the volume of data I actually need to move? And obviously there's a function here of, well, what is the amount of data I need to move? And then what is the bandwidth I have available? Along with, what is the amount of time I have to actually perform the copy? When do I need it in the cloud? Or maybe it's, well, how quickly is it changing? So all these things work together. So you're going to have to look at it to say, okay, how much bandwidth do I have? What's the volume of data? How much time do I have to actually move it? And how frequently is it changing? If it's not changing too fast, and typically in most data sets, a very small percentage is actually changing. So then I can say, well, I have a lot of data to move. I don't have enough bandwidth available, and I really want it there within a couple of weeks. Well, hey, that's going to be a fantastic scenario where I want to do this kind of offline data migration. But the data is still probably changing in a lot of scenarios, just that 1 or 2% is probably changing. So then I think about, okay, well, what ability do I have technically to catch up for that delta? So there's still some changing. I'm going to copy the bulk of it offline, but then what exists to help me once the data has been ingested into that target storage account or counts? And then work out, well, what's changed, and just copy that delta. Now, solutions like Azure Storage Mover work with DataBox. So it can go and move the majority of the data offline and then catch up over the network. So I think about all of those things to find out, will an offline data migration actually work? So in this case, we're obviously going to say we decided yes. I can do offline. Now, if you couldn't do offline, then you're in scenarios of, well, how do I increase the bandwidth? How can I compress the data? How do I break the data down into smaller groupings, more manageable chunks so I can do it over the network? But in this case, hey, offline actually makes a huge amount of sense for us. And so how do I start using Databox to do this offline data migration? And again, I'm going to focus on ingestion into Azure, but again, everything I'm talking about here also applies to exporting out of Azure back to your data center. Now, I guess the first thing I should talk about is, well, what are the target types of service I can deploy into Azure using this? So it's blob, flat namespace, data lake, so the hierarchical namespace, the Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, Azure Files, so file storage, and managed disks. And it supports things like blob tiers, so I can see the hot, the cool, the cold, and copy into accordingly. For Azure Files, it supports standard and premium. Now, it doesn't support things like Azure NetApp Files or Oracle on Azure, or obviously directly into databases. But typically in those scenarios, like in a NetApp filer, I could do a copy snapshot, put it into files, and then a two-step migration. If it was a database, maybe I, again, export it into files, get them into a storage account, and then restore it into the database service. So that's completely possible to do. Now, our focus in this is the next generation devices. So they retire both of the previous offerings. So we used to have an 80 and an 800. That was the Azure Databox Heavy. Remember, the Heavy was a monster. It was 500 pounds. You had to ship it freight, so it was hugely painful, and even more painful if you actually tried to move it in some way. So if you used the previous generation ones before, they're going to get retired as the new generation is made available in those regions. So you just won't have that option at all anymore. Now, when I think of the new generations, they come in one form factor, i.e. the box, and again, I'm going to show it to you in a second. It looks exactly the same. Now, it comes in two possible sizes. It comes in a 120 and a 525. But again, looks the same. So if I think about this we'll start drawing a data box. So we will draw our data box in orange. So I'm going to get my data box. I'm going to draw it very, very big. And this next generation it's like a Star Trek next gen. So this next generation data box, I have that 120 or 525 option. And that is usable space. The actual amount of space itself is for the 120, it's 150 terabytes. For the 525 terabytes, it's 600 terabytes. It's using a RAID 5 configuration internally. So some of the storage space is used for parity information to handle certain types of disk failures. And so you really care about the usable amount of space. And because they both now share this same form factor, it's overnight shipping. Again, with the previous Heavy, it was hideous. It was a whole freight experience. It was a horrible, horrible thing. So we've got this really nice now single form factor overnight shipping to you and back, all with this nice NVMe storage. Now, for the network connectivity, it's up to 100 gigabits per second into the device. Now, the network connections it actually has it has a data 1 and a data 2. So it has two of these connections. Now, data 1 and data 2, these are 100 gigabit Ethernet. So super, super fast. And these are the things you're going to want to use. It uses the QSFP pluggable interface. And so you'll need to have those little adapters in your data center to plug in. It doesn't come with those adapters. You would have to provide those. You plug them in. Now, it does also have a data 3 and a management port. These are 10 gigabit Ethernet. So if I didn't have that connectivity or I just didn't need it, I do have a regular type connection as well I can use. And again, we have this management port, which as the name suggests is specific to management. And the net result of my import is up to 100 gigabits per second across, assuming I'm doing both of these connections, then I can get that 100 gigabits per second. It uses a regular power cable, and that's going to be shipped. So based on whatever my regional standard is, it's going to have that in the box, and you can just go and plug it. It doesn't require any kind of massive cable. It's the same type of power cable you get with a PC. It's exactly the same. It's still a highly ruggedized device. So you have these kind of handles at the top. It's very, very sturdy. It's tamper-proof. It uses secure boot. It's got TPM 2.0. So it is super, super rugged. But it does still now come actually in shipping. Now, there is also Azure Data Box Disk. So that existed before. This is 7 terabytes usable, 8 terabytes actual. You can get up to 5 of those disks per order, so 35 terabytes of usable capacity per order, and you can attach them just via USB, for example. Data Box Disk is typically used by customers where they want to avoid some secondary copy while collecting systems data. For example, imagine I'm an in-vehicle logging system for autonomous driving or an advanced driver assist system. You can just plug these disks into the cars as they're zooming around, and then take the disk, ship it back to the data center, and it gets ingested into your storage account, where I can go and do all that analysis. So that's kind of a specialized use case, but it helps understand where I might use it. Now, before we get into the details, in terms of how many of these things can you get? So I can do up to 10 database disk orders. Remember, each of those database disk orders is up to 5 disks. I can get up to 5 120 terabyte data boxes and up to 4 525 terabyte data boxes. So technically, I could get a lot of hardware being shipped to me, but you probably don't need that much unless it's a really huge migration you're going through. So let's walk through the process and look at what at each stage I'm doing and what it looks like, and that will kind of start to explain what's happening behind the scenes in some of these things. So we'll actually jump over to the portal for a second and ignore the fact that I already have one of these. Obviously, this is the delivered, this is what I'm going to show you. But we would create a new Azure Data Box. I'm going to import to Azure, but notice it does give me the option to export from Azure as well. Obviously, it's just going to be a subscription I'm working with where my storage accounts are. It is going to create an order. So I have a resource group where I can track that. And now this is an interesting thing. The source country region. So this is where I am. This is my data center where I want the data box shipped. Then the destination Azure region, where the storage accounts actually reside. And what I can actually now do is I could say, hey, actually, I'm in the United Kingdom, but I want to restore it to West US 3. So this is a pretty big deal and a change in what we had before. So realize what we're doing now is we're deciding, okay, the region where my storage accounts are, but then I'm focusing on what is my data center. Because it can now do that. So this is a great new feature, cross-region data transfer. The device is going to be delivered from a local data center in your geography, e.g. UK or Australia, doesn't matter, but then it will get restored over the Azure, the Microsoft backbone, to the target set of data centers where your storage account resides. So this is supported across any set of locations, locales. There's no additional data charges to the customer. So that's going to be really useful when you can't ship the data box across commerce boundaries. So, hey, look, I'm in the UK, but I need it in the US. I don't really want to ship the data box from the US to the UK. Well, I don't need to now. They would just ship it from a UK data center and then import it for you over the Microsoft backbone into, for example, a US-based account. So this is a really great capability that I can now do and not have to worry about that anymore. So if we jump back over again, so we're going to do exactly that scenario. I hit next. And now it's going to show me the offerings available with the data box. And what I care about are these two nice new ones. So the 120 and the 525. Notice it's telling me these are the nice new versions. It's going through the amount of time I get, and I'm going to come back to this, but 10 days for the 120 and 20 for the 525. It tells you the types of services that get supported. So blobs, page and block, files, managed disks, ADLS Gen 2 is just hierarchical namespace. It's telling you the connectivity it's going to give you and all of the other nice things. So you would pick the size based on the amount of data you had. I only need a 120, so I can just pick a 120. And remember, I picked a region at the start. I'll give it a name. I'm just going to call it test 1. And then I hit data destination. So do I want to copy to storage accounts and or managed disks? So this is an important thing. If I say both of these for now, so with storage accounts, I would go and select the storage accounts that I want it to actually make available on the data box. And I can also enable the option to copy to archive. So what it's doing right here is when we think of the storage account, which is what I'm going to focus on initially, when I pick the storage accounts, what it's going to do is for each of those storage accounts, it's going to result in a set of shares being created actually on your data box. So for example, in my region I pick, I have a number of storage accounts. So right now I'm going to say, okay, tick, pretend the name is store 1. It's not, but imagine it is. What this results in is on the data box itself, what's happening is there's a number of shares get created. Now for every storage account, realize a storage account can have block blobs, page blobs, and it can have Azure file shares. It's a general purpose V2. So what it's now going to do under there, for that first storage account, well, it's going to create 3 shares. I'm going to get a share called the name of the storage account. So store 1 underscore block blob. Then I'm going to get another share called name of the storage account, page blob. Then another share, store 1 AZ file for Azure file shares. If I had a second storage account, it would get its own set of shares created. So it would go and get, well, store 2 underscore block blob, etc., etc., etc. You get the idea of what it's going to do. But what's interesting, remember, is block blob has tiers. And so what I actually get for block blob is at minimum, what I'm going to see is a sub folder under this block blob share. I'll see a folder called cold, cool, and hot. So if I copy the files to each of those subfolders, you get the idea. It's going to put it in the correct tier. Now, if I check that box to give me archive, so that's an option, well, then I'm also going to see archive as a subfolder under that. So that's the whole point. And then under any of these shares, I create another folder, which will be the container name or the Azure file share name. I don't ever copy directly into these. I'll create a subfolder, which will then relate to that container or Azure file share. Now, if I pick the Azure Disk option, what the Azure Disk is going to ask me for is a storage account for the staging. And I just put in a bunch of resource groups separated by semicolons, which then will be made available as folders on the Azure data box that I would copy the VHDs to, and they would be stored as managed disk into those resource groups. So I would get a different folder structure, share structure created on the data box for the managed disks. I'm not going to do managed disks. We're just going to do storage accounts. So I would go through and I would select all the different storage accounts I want. And again, for every storage account, I'll get those options shown to me. So I have full control over that. Next, we get to pick the security information. So I can choose for the encryption. So it's going to use a hardware-based RAID encryption is going to be the final solution. So it can either be a Microsoft, a platform managed key, or a customer managed key. Now, if I do a customer managed key, then I have to select a key vault, the key, and a user assigned managed identity that I'm going to give permission for this DataBox order to use to actually go and access the key for the encryption. So what we're thinking about now is, remember, so in this whole process, obviously this is an Azure job. So we've got my good old Azure up here. And what we're doing right now is we're creating this order. Now, when I'm doing this encryption, I get to pick. I get to say, okay, well, do I want that platform managed key, in which case I don't have to do anything else, or a customer managed key? And if it's a customer managed key, then I'm going to tell it an Azure key vault, the key to use, and I'm going to have to give it a user assigned managed identity that this order is going to be able to use that has the required permissions on the key to be able to use it. Whichever one I use, everything on this data box is going to get encrypted with AES-256 encryption. So it's all encrypted. No matter what I do, I have full encryption of everything on the data box. Now, in addition to that, so I'm going to go back to Microsoft Managed Key. You can do double encryption. So if I do double encryption, it's also going to use BitLocker. So that's then going to apply a software-based encryption over the hardware-based encryption. Again, it's already using by default a RAID controller-powered set of encryption. I also have two sets of passwords. One is the device password. And if I don't set anything, it will set it for me, and I can read it from the portal. And then for the shares, there's going to be a share password. I can use system generated, or I can say, hey, I want to use my own. So you make those choices. Next, you just go and fill out the contact details. So how you want it shipped, Microsoft managed, or you can arrange to pick up and all the other stuff. Give it your address, who to notify, tags, review the order, and you're done. So that is the process. Like that's everything you're going to do as part of that. Let's go back to my data box. Now, I guess a quick note. If you were doing Azure Data Box Disk, everything is exactly the same. It's identical. The only difference would be, hey, I can pick up to 5 of the disks I want as part of the order, depending on, is it 7 or up to 35 terabytes I actually need to use. Once you've done all of this, and so obviously I've got an order already on my system, you can go and check on its status. If I look at mine, on the overview page, I can see mine has been delivered. So it is delivered, I've got it, it arrives. Now it's going to ship overnight. So let's start tracking through the overall process of what's going to happen. So I have placed my order. Now, as soon as I place my order, a few things happen. Once it's processed, I'll actually see the credentials for the device show up in the order. It will also show me the MAC addresses of the Data 1, the Data 2, and the Data 3 adapters. So that might be really useful because I might want to go and pre-provision, for example, DHCP, to give it a specific IP address when it arrives. And we'll see why that's more useful in a second, but I don't have to use the management port. All the management can also be done over the data ports. So what's happening now? Step 1 is they're going to ship it to you. So they're going to ship it to your location. So step 1, they're going to ship it. I cannot draw a truck, but imagine that looks like a truck and it's trundling along its way. So overnight, they will ship you the data box. Now, unlike, again, the previous generations that just shipped with no packaging, it comes in a box. It has protective foam bits to keep it from moving around, and it has like a little plastic bag over it. Now, you can use this device to copy the data to it for, if it's 120, so the amount of time you can use it with the included price you're paying is if it's the 120 terabytes, it's 10 days. If it's the 525 terabyte, it's 20 days. So we get more time. And I can pay daily overage charges, but you probably don't want to do that. Obviously, you get more time for the 525 because it's bigger. It's going to take you more time to copy to it. So at this point, you're going to open up the box. There's going to be probably a little note that says README, giving you basic instructions. Remove the top pieces of protected foam. Remove the top bag. Keep all of that. We're going to need all of this to ship it back. Now, on top of the data box are two handles. Just lift it out of the box with those handles, then move it into your data center, which is where we're going to need to then go and connect it up. So now you can see we have the device in all of its fantastic glory. So step one, we're going to lift up the flap on the front, and we're going to keep this open all of the time because this allows airflow. So don't close these flaps. Now on the front, you'll also see it tells you information for the management port. This is a fixed IP, 192.168.100.10, cannot be changed, which would mean to use it, I'd have to put a machine on that same /24 subnet. But we don't have to use it, and we'll see why in a second. On the back, we do the same thing. We push the little connector up, we open up the back cover, and I can see the power cable and the 4 different network connections. For now, I'm just going to remove the power cable. Now we can see here we have the management connection and the data 3, the 10 gigabit Ethernet connection. I'm going to attach both of these, although I'm not actually going to use the management connection. On top of them, we see the data 1 and the data 2. These require that QSFP interface, but they give you those higher speeds. Now, by default, the data connections are set to DHCP, and you can change that later on if you want to. But if I just go into my order and look at device details, yes, it's going to show me all the various credentials, but it shows me the MAC addresses of all 3 of the interfaces. So data 1, data 2, they're the 100 gigabit Ethernet. Data 3 is the 10 gigabit Ethernet. So what's very commonly going to happen is you can take those MAC addresses and pre-configure in your environment the IP address you want it to be given to. So that means I actually don't need to use that management port at all. I can just go and connect to those now known IP addresses for what those data ports are. So when I think about, okay, it's arrived to you, and then what you're going to have in your environment, member, you have your network switches. So in my data center, I've got my set of network switching. Maybe I've pre-configured the MAC address. So now I'm going to connect all of these things in. And again, I might, for the data 3. So these can be DHCP, which is the default, or you could go in and change it to static. Remember, the management is always 192.168.100.10. I cannot change that. So at this point, it's now part of, and it's on my network. So I've plugged those things in. So now it's all connected. I can attach the power cable. Now on mine, it auto started once I attached it. But if not, we're just going to hit the power button. And it's on when the power button is illuminated. Now it's going to take a little while to start up. Think a few minutes. No, I have it in my office, but it goes without saying it's designed to be in your data center. That's where you're going to have all the fast connections. And honestly, when its fans spin up, it is loud. But the good news is we are now done with the physical setup. Once the disk status light starts flashing, we are ready to go. So now the first step, now it's powered on, is what I now want to be able to do is, well, I have to unlock the device. So I have to unlock it. And remember, for this, we need the device password. So if we jump over to our browser, so it's telling us up here, and I can view it, this is the device password. So I'm going to copy this. And I know what its IP address is because I configured the MAC address in my environment. So I'm just going to go to the IP address of one of the data connections. Now you're going to get a certificate error. Realize it has a certificate. We can go and look at it. But the certificate is for its internal name. That is, I am using an IP address, remember. I can't resolve this name. Now, there are things I can do later on to change the name. I can then give it different certificates, so I can get rid of these certificate problems, and I'll show you that in a bit. But for right now, it's going to give you, hey, this isn't private. I'm just going to hit advanced and continue to it. So now what I need to do is unlock the device. So I put in my password and sign in. And now I'm at the dashboard of the device. And straight away, it's showing me the connections that I have. So I do have that management connected, but I'm not using it. I'm doing the management via this data connection. I do not have data 1 and data 2 connected, hence it's not showing anything right now. Just quickly on the menu, there's the certificates. So this is where if I really wanted to, I could go and change the name, change the DNS, add certificates, so I could actually get rid of this not secure and have it secured in my environment. So that's where I can go and change all of that. But my dashboard is really my place to go. You can now see my device currently is unlocked because I entered that password, I'm using it. And it's showing me the amount of space I have available and the amount of space I have used. Now, the first thing I may want to do, potentially, is change the network interfaces. So if I go to Set Network Interfaces, it's telling me management is just fixed. There's nothing I can do here. It is what it is. Data 1, Data 2, Data 3 are all dynamic, but I could change any of them to static if I wish, and go ahead and configure its IP, subnet, and gateway. So if I need to, I can do everything I need. At this point, I probably want to start copying stuff to it. So that's where I have connect and copy. If I go over to connect and copy, it's going to show me entries for each of my storage accounts, show me any errors, any warnings. I can expand this out, and it will show me the different shares that are available. And is it SMB, NFS, or REST-based interfaces for it? And it will show me the objects copied, objects, etc., etc. So think about where we are in the flow right now. So we've unlocked the device. So now we have our source data somewhere. So we have our source with all our ones and zeros on it, all of our data. So now what we're going to do is from this device, I'm going to go ahead and connect. So now I'm going to connect via these network connections so I can start doing it. Now, there's different ways I can actually do this. I can just copy the data. Now, I probably don't want to be on if I'm on a client machine, realize, and I go and connect to the data box and then connect to the target where the source is, it's going to hairpin via my client device. I would therefore either be on the server and I would do the net use or the API and copy it from here to the data box. And actually, before I go on to the second option, let's just focus on that one for now. So I know the IP address, and remember, I have the share name depending on which service I want to use. And it's showing me all of these, and it tells me how to connect. So access via SMB, it's giving me the storage account, the username, and the password. It's giving me the command to use as well. Now, these same credentials are also available in the Azure portal. I see exactly the same thing for those shares. So those credentials are available both in the portal and locally on the device. Now, I want to do block just because I think block is going to be by far the most interesting. So I need that password, and I'm going to run a netuse command. So I'm using a netuse, the IP address of the box, the share name, I want block blob. The user is just the storage account name, and then the password. And I am now connected to it. Now realize, before I go any further, the performance of actually copying is going to vary. Is it SMB, NFS, REST? If it's lots of small files, whatever that might be. So realize the actual performance will vary slightly. But now I can go over to my Z drive. And this is the important part. It has created, it has under it 3 subfolders: cold, cool, and hot. And again, if I'd enabled archive, I would see that as well. So what I now need to do is, depending on which archive I want the data to go to, I would say, okay, well, I want it to go to the hot tier. And now I would create a folder, which would be the container. So I will call it container 1. I would go into container 1. And now I would go ahead and actually copy the data. And again, Block doesn't have true folders. It would be part of a virtual directory, but I would go through and copy that data. So now I would just go ahead and copy. I've got my critical data, and I'll copy into my current folder. And now I have all my critical information, dogs playing together, just random stuff. So there's now data that I've copied into this. And I would just repeat this process. And what I should then start to see, let's just click that again. So you can see there's 7 objects copied. I don't have any errors, and I can start to see some of the details about exactly what's happening on the dashboard. It takes a little while to refresh, but it will realize I've started to copy some data to the actual device. Now, one of the things that's happening here, as we talked about, is this is the option of, hey, some client piece is doing the copy operation. But the data box is actually super, super powerful. So the other option I actually have now is there's an ability for the device to do the copy. There's a copy data option. So now within the device itself, we can see I have this copy data. Now with copy data, I create a copy job, and I would give it all of the details. So you can see name of the job, where the data is, how to connect to it, the password, where you want it to go to. You can have regex expressions, which files you want, optimization. And then the data box will just take care of actually doing the copy for you. It's not having to go through my device in any way. And so I've done this. So I'm spending all this time, I'm copying all the data, copy, all great to go. Once you have finished copying all your data, now you need to prepare to send it back. So to send it back, again, make sure you don't do this till you're completely happy you've done this thing. I've viewed the dashboard, everything is looking good. Notice here it's giving me the option to start the return. But also down here, you could also shut down, restart it at any time while you're using the device. But I'm going to say, let's go and prepare to ship it. And I would just start preparation. And now it's going through and it's checking all of the various things to make sure it's really ready to go. We can see it's progressing through. So right now, for example, it's locked the device. It's just generating a list of all the files. It will then compress it. And that's all done. Notice here, I can download the file list so I know exactly what I put on it. And now the device is ready to be shipped to Microsoft. So download this list and then shut down the device. So I can go over to shut down the device and I would hit shutdown. And it will go through and complete. So back on where we are in our process. So after we did the connect, and then we did all of the copying of our data, then we prepare and shut down. And now we need to disconnect all of the different cables. So I'm just going to reverse the process. So disconnect the cables, disconnect the power cable. Obviously, once I'm sure it's turned off, wrap up the power cable, put it back in, close both the flaps, make sure they've snapped in to make sure it's secure. I would then put it back in the box, put the plastic bag back over it, put the foam protection blocks back on, tape it up, and then arrange for it to be picked up. So now, hey, it's going to get shipped back. So that's step 7. And now the data gets imported into your storage account. Now, there is no specific SLA for the amount of times that will take. Again, it depends on the amount of data, the size of the files, number of files, etc., etc. But I don't know, typically it's a few days. Now, what's kind of cool here, if there was some hardware damage, for example, in the shipping, like a PSU failure or something, as long as the disks are okay, they can move them to a donor device to still be able to restore your data. So it's a very resilient system. In the portal, I can see the status of as it's progressing along this whole thing. And then finally, once all of the import has been complete, the final step they do is a scrub. And the data is scrubbed to NIST SP 888 revision 1 standards. So there's no getting the data back off of it. It is completely scrubbed. From a pricing perspective of actually using a data box, if we jump over to the pricing page, so here I'll select West2 S2 where it is available. So we can see there's a service fee, an extra day fee if I'm beyond those 10 days, and then the shipping fee. If it's a data box 525, well then it's a higher price service fee. Shipping is the same. The extra day fee is higher as well. So those are the prices I would pay to actually use it to do this offline data migration. And that was it. So I hope this was useful. Hopefully it makes complete sense. I mean, the picture looks complicated, but it's actually a pretty simple thing. When I place the order, I tell it where I want the data to be able to go as potential targets. Those then get hydrated as a folder structure on the data box. It arrives at my location. I plug it into network connectivity. I unlock it using the password in the portal. I then go and either connect to it via the machines and copy the data, or I can create copy data jobs. So the data box is doing that copy for me. Once complete, I prepare it, shut it down, put it back in its packing materials, ship it back. They import it in. And then once it's finished, it's scrubbed to those NIST SP 888 Rev 1 standards. I do have the option to control the encryption with a custom managed key if I want, and I can even double encrypt it. But now, when I do have those scenarios where because of bandwidth or volume of data or the rate of change or just the time I have, this is a really nice solution when I have to do that offline migration. As we talked about already, things like Azure Storage Mover will work with this, do the bulk of the data move with this technology, and then catch up. So I hope this was useful. Till next video, take care.